guys, welcome to another awesome episode of the Boston Chris podcast with yours truly, Boston Chris, and we are super excited to feature a friend of mine, singer-songwriter, artist in his own right. Scott Shawn White is my guest this week on the show. We are super excited to have Scott here with us today to talk about his career, his life in music, his upbringing, his songwriting, some of the cuts that he has with people like Cody Johnson and Bryan Martin, amongst many, many others. How he goes from Texas to Nashville, back and forth all the time. Just so many cool different things that we talk to Scott about in this episode. He's also going to share with us two live acoustic versions of songs that he has written. The first one is his current single, which is called Pullin Weeds, and he's also going to share probably his biggest song, which is called God Bless the Boy, which was a huge cut for Cody Johnson. Really excited about this entire episode. I think you guys will love it. And without any further ado, let's get into the nuts and bolts of what makes Scott Shawn White so incredible. Y'all check it out.
Hey y'all, this is India Ramey. Thanks for tuning in to the Boston Chris Show.
Hey guys, so we are here with singer-songwriter extraordinaire Scott Shawn White, first time on any of my program, and really excited to have you here. And we're going to talk to Scott today about a lot of stuff about his songwriting, being an artist, being from Texas. A lot of stuff I'm going to ask him today. It's going to be pretty dope. I hope you guys enjoy the show. But Scott has been gracious enough to share a couple of live performances with us of his originals. And the first one he's going to do is his latest single. It's called Pullin Weeds. So tell us the story behind this song, how it came to be.
Yeah, I was up in Nashville. We wrote this about 3 years ago, and that particular day, my buddy Adam Wheeler was stuck in traffic and running real late for the write that day. It took him about 45 minutes to get to Music Row. So the other guy, me, Ben Roberts, and we just kind of hung outside the publishing house. It was a beautiful day. We stood out in the parking lot and caught up on life, you know. And catching up on life that day meant that he was telling me that he was just a few weeks out of rehab. You know, trying to save his family and save his life, and he told me the whole wild, crazy story about all of it and how he went in, how they kind of intervened and got him into rehab, and he's been clean and sober almost 3 years now, by the way.
Wow,
but
awesome.
So he tells me this whole story, and then Adam pulls up, and we pretty much walk into the publishing house and go straight to work. Adam has no idea what Ben and I had been talking about, none.
Wow.
Matter of fact, he didn't know this story until after we wrote the song, like months later. And he says, man, I got this idea called Pullin Weeds. And it's not, when you hear the song, you'll know it's not all Ben's story, but Ben's story found its way in there, particularly in the second verse and particularly in the bridge. And then when I started playing this song out live, when the full mix, actually the full band version of it came out a year ago, July 14th. And the one that just came out is the acoustic version. And but when that came out and I started playing it out, I just started to really realize I knew what the song was about the day we wrote it. But sometimes you start playing it out and you realize how much it is your everyday life. Like all these things that I spend so much time and energy on that I'm trying not to spend as much time and energy on, negativity and things that just drain your energy, and you try to get your priorities in order. So it's been great for me mental health wise for me. And I'm one of the writers on it,
And it's great too to hear like the longer the shelf life is of a song too, as a consumer, as a listener. I'm not a writer at all, but as a listener, I imagine that the song over time can take on a different perspective, a different meaning based on your experiences in performing the song for other people and hearing their reactions to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's always the testament to a great song, in my opinion, when you can reach more people and hear things within the song that you yourself wrote that you didn't know existed at the time you wrote it.
Right.
It's such a cool feeling, I imagine.
There's some magic in songwriting.
Absolutely, and man, it's just such an honor to be able to discuss that magic here on the internet with amazing songwriters like yourself, Scott. But we're so excited to share this song with y'all. I'm going to make sure not only are you guys going to get to hear this live version of it, but the newest single, Pullin Weeds, you have an acoustic version of it out as well that you just released. So I'm going to make sure there's a link to that in the description below for everybody out there to check out. Because there are two different versions of this song out there, and you guys should definitely check them both out. But here is Pullin Weeds, first time ever live on the Boston Chris podcast. Y'all check it out.
Good morning, Boston Chris Show. Or afternoon, whatever time it is when you see this. I'm Scott Sean White. This is my song Pullin Weeds. The acoustic version came out last Friday. But it ain't about gardening. Talk radio, talk around my way. Says the world's gone to hell, think I'm done with him. Cell phone ringing in my kid's ball game. Hold the side button down till I see the light fade. I'm pulling weeds, one at a time. Anything that chokes the light out of who I wanna be, gonna plant new seeds. But first things first, get my hands down in this dirt before the roots get too deep. I'm pulling weeds, getting mad about things that don't matter that much, carrying around that heavy old grudge, worrying about what other people think. Yeah, it's all gotta go so my heart can breathe. I'm pulling weeds, one at a time. Anything that chokes the life out of who I wanna be, gonna plant new seeds. But first things first, get my hands out in this dirt before the roots get too deep. I'm pulling weeds. Goodbye fear, goodbye doubt, and things I can't do a thing about. Goodbye guilt, goodbye shame. It's time I make a little space and say hello to grace. I'm pulling weeds, one at a time. Anything that chokes the light out of who I wanna be, gonna plant new seeds. But first things first, get my hands down in this dirt before the roots get too deep. I'm pulling weeds, I'm pulling weeds, pulling weeds.
All right, so we are back again. First time on the show, we have Scott Sean White, singer-songwriter extraordinaire, artist in his own right. And one of the things I definitely want to talk to you about later is kind of the difference in the comparison between being a songwriter and being an artist, because that's kind of a big part of your evolution over the course of your career. But before we do that, I want to break the ice a little bit. What are your favorite drinks right now?
Well, it's water right now because my A1C was borderline pre-diabetic. So my favorite drink, Dr. Pepper, for the last 40 plus some odd years or 50 years, had to take a severe back seat.
So you don't do the zero sugar Dr. Pepper?
No, because I've heard things about that aspartame and stuff that's worse for you than the sugar is.
So I thought the same thing too. And then once I became the same thing, bad AIC or A1C, whatever, and they were like, you got to cut out the sugary drinks. In order for you to like consume enough aspartame to where it actually hurts you, It would kill
Mm-hmm.
you just by drinking that much.
Oh,
So like
well, there you go.
I learned this through a nutritionist, so I trust it now. It's probably not the best thing for you, but literally, according to my nutritionist, you would have to drink so much of it in order for it
Yeah.
to be toxic that you would die from it just by having that much. So
Well, I've been drinking a bunch of water, really for several years now.
that's the best
But
way to go anyway. To be fair,
yeah,
yeah.
so I'm pretty boring on the drink side of things.
Well, they told me to start drinking water, so I started getting those little sugar-free, flavor packets for the
Yeah.
water, and so I've increased my water intake as well. But yeah, let's get into the nuts and bolts. I always like asking that. Number one, it's part of my theme song for the show, and
Yeah.
also I think it breaks the ice, especially for folks that like for you and me. I've never met you. This is my first time talking to you.
Yeah.
So but anyway, first question that's not really anything to do with drinking. Um, tell us where you grew up and kind of what life was like for you back in those days, just kind of coming up into the world.
Yeah, I grew up in Kerrville, Texas. I was born in Waco, but my real dad was from all the stories I've been told. I've never met him, and he died when I was 13. But from what I was told, he was so bad and so out of control that mom left him as soon as I was born and moved to the hill country. And so I grew up in Kerrville. I got a stepdad. Who I thought was my real dad, until I was, until my until 13, and but anyway, it was a real violent house. There's no other way to say it. My real dad had beat my mom up pretty bad. My stepdad was violent too, and so everybody around me was either addicts or alcoholics or both, as far as all the adults. And so it was a pretty crazy childhood, but I survived and I'm here.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
amazing.
probably a big part of the reason to write songs. And it's a big part of the reason for a lot of all the best things about my life. So
Well, you're not the
um,
first great songwriter we've had on the show that's been a survivor of domestic violence. So, first of all, I'm glad you got out of that, and I'm sure it probably still affects you quite a lot. My wife herself is PTSD and dealt with a lot of baggage and stuff like that from that same kind of situation. So I know a lot about it, deal with it every single day. So kudos on just living through that and still living through it. I'm sure. Um, but let's talk about the music, especially back then. You're growing up in a rough space. As a
yeah.
songwriter, you're a songwriter, pretty much a full-time musician. I imagine music kind of permeated its way into your soul at a very young age. So tell us what that was like. When did music first find you?
Yeah, music from the get-go was kind of I mean, I hate to use this phrase because it sounds kind of like it belongs in a Hallmark card or something, but music had kind of a magical thing to me when I was really young. Probably because all the craziness that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my early days of consuming music, it was the 70s and the 80s, and my mom wore out some Kenny Rogers and some Lionel Richie and some KERV radio,
Mm-hmm.
AM radio in Kerrville, Texas, and a little Motown, a little bit of all that. And then I got into rock and roll when I was in my teens, like every teenager does.
Absolutely. Yep.
Got into some hard rock, some heavy metal, went to the P102's Texas Jam at the Cotton Bowl back in the 80s. Went with my brother Daniel and fell in love with Sammy Hagar and I mean, just all that stuff. And then I started playing music a little bit when I was about 16. I started playing in a garage band with some buddies around age 17. I started playing cover bands when I was 20, 21, and those were mostly dance bands. So then I got all into the R&B and funk and you know pop and rock stuff as the bands played that stuff. And then one of those bands that I was in early on ended up being my main source of living for 29 years. It was a 10-piece R&B funk band called Professor D.
Wow.
And we played a bunch of clubs, but we also played mostly, especially the last 15 years of it that I was in it, we played mostly weddings and corporate events, and I played keyboards in it. And but yeah, so musically that was that part of things. But I wrote and produced hip hop and R&B music for about 20 years before I ever took my first trip to Nashville.
I never would have guessed. That's incredible.
I know, right?
Yeah,
Me
that's incredible.
either.
Yeah.
When I play shows now, a solo acoustic with my guitar and my keyboard, people are like, "What?" And I don't blame them. I'm like, "Yes, I understand." You look at me now, you're like, "What in the world?" But no, I was a studio engineer at 3 different studios around Dallas, and I was programming beats for hip hop and R&B artists. And a matter of fact, all the stuff I've had in TV shows and movies and all that stuff has all been that hip hop and R&B stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then in 2005, I made my first trip to Nashville because I was in my mid 30s, and I started to want to tell some of the stories from my growing up, and I couldn't tell my quality redneck upbringing stories in hip hop and R&B.
No, probably wouldn't fit.
I was like, yeah, this ain't really gonna work over here. And so I started writing what I thought were country-ish songs, and I made my first trip to Nashville in January 2005, and that town just lit me up. I went to little dive bars and little hole in the walls and heard songwriters play songs that just made my mouth drop to the floor. And on the way home from that trip, I told my wife on the phone, I said, I think I should start coming up here once a month. And she said, I think you should too. And so that's what I did. I've been going to Nashville at least once a month ever since 2005. So this is my 20th year doing that. Since 2018, I've been there pretty much every other week. So I've been there twice a month. So
nice. So
that's the quick synopsis of 30 some odd years of.
Well, I want to catch people up out there that may not know from outside the state of Texas, especially that the town of Kerrville is kind of a mecca for folk music and roots music. Was it that way with you growing up as well, or has it kind of morphed into that over time? I'm not too familiar with the history of Kerrville.
I love telling this story because the Kerrville Folk Festival is world famous and is a center of folk music. Kerrville itself, maybe not so much as far as the general town. But when I was young, I was born in 68. So the folk festival started, I think, in 72, if I have that right. And I think I do. It's just over 50 years old. Wow.
Wow, that's crazy.
And it started in 72. And I remember the old men at the freaking hardware store in Kerrville, or the feed store, wherever we're at, talking about a bunch of damn hippies out there in the field smoking weed and playing guitars. Yep. Literally. I remember them talking about it like, what are these weirdos doing out there? And so when I was growing up, it was zero influence on me. We didn't go. But then I got to play it. I was one of the new folk finalists in 2019. And it was and has been and is such a blessing to me now, because I went down there for that year, and I got, I've got a lot of completely out of hand memories in that town, up and down every street. I always tell people, I don't drink. I've never drank because I had the kind of childhood that I never saw the fun side of drinking. I only saw the call the police, somebody might die tonight side of drinking. This is the truth.
Yeah.
And so my reaction to that as a kid, this isn't me being a good guy that I haven't ever drank. It was just my reaction. I went, I don't want any part of that. And so to go back in 2019 and get some good memories at the Kerrville Folk Festival with people who love songs and they love songwriters and they love life. It was such a blessing to me. And then I've gone down there at least twice, maybe 3 other times, just to hang out for a few days during the festival when I wasn't, I just played that one in 2019. But I love the people so much, and the big welcome home sign, or when you walk in, it says welcome home, which obviously has multiple meanings for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I imagine.
And so every time I go down there, I get more great memories to, balance out all the
All the
crazy
crazy stuff,
ones from
right?
growing up,
So it's funny you talk about alcohol in that way. None of this is on my outline. I have nothing here about Kerrville, so this is all off the cuff. But the crazy thing about alcohol, I'm there with you. I've been a very social drinker. I've touched it, not really much of a drinker myself, just really socially. But it's the same kind of reason as you. Like I saw what it did to people. Like a lot of my family were alcoholics, so when I was a kid, I felt like I had two choices. I can either fall in line and be one of them, or I can say, no, I'm not gonna be that fool. Like I see this foolishness all the time. So imagine that's kind of where you were going just now with with the alcohol and why perhaps you didn't touch it, right?
Yeah, I just saw how dangerous it could be and how quickly things could get out of hand, and like I said, somebody might die.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
It's
so
just funny how when
I'm out.
when we are our most malleable, that is when our biggest decisions take place, which can be really scary when you think about it, because we're still young and shouldn't be having to make
Yeah,
decisions like that, right?
right.
So was there one event in your life that just kind of presented itself and made you think to yourself, I want to be a musician, I want to be an artist? Was there one thing that kind of made you take that step?
I would say if there's one thing that had something to do with all of this, it wouldn't be a moment that made me go, I want to be a musician. I can't remember that moment, but I do remember the moment that the biggest moment that enabled me to become a full-time musician. And that was, we had moved to Dallas. I'll tell you the quick short version of why we moved to Dallas. My mom divorced my guy that was the dad that was my stepdad when I was 13. She dated a few fellas. Well, she dated this one dude named Bruno in Kerrville, and Bruno was great until we inherited a little bit of money when mom's mom died, and then he went back to drugs and everything went completely haywire, and he threatened to kill my mother and my brother Joey, who had Down syndrome, with a knife. Went to jail in Kerrville. He was already on parole from prison.
Wow.
Can't make this stuff up. He was already on parole, and so but then he found Jesus again in jail. Mom dropped the charges. They couldn't do anything and put him back in prison, so they sent him to a halfway house in Dallas. We followed him to Dallas from Kerrville, where 3 months later he robbed a Texas State Optical and a Minyards with my BB gun that looked like a 45 pistol.
Wow.
And he wasn't eligible for parole till I was 32. But I say all that to go, coming to Dallas, I went to Bryan Adams High School that semester. And then I was so bored there because Kerrville schools were so far ahead of Dallas schools that I was falling asleep in class. I told my mom I'm miserable. And she said, well, let's go talk to your counselor. The counselor said, well, why don't you go to a magnet school? I said, what's a magnet school? She said, well, they have an arts magnet, a science magnet, a law magnet. I said, what's an arts magnet? And she said, it's where they do music and dance and theater. Oh, how do you get in there? You audition. So I went and auditioned for piano, and I couldn't play a major scale at the time. So the lady at the piano audition was kind enough to go, they need voices in the choir. So I went down and auditioned for the choir. And I was terrified. I was so terrified that I was shaking. I was shaking like this, right?
Yeah.
And it was putting vibrato in my voice. My physical shaking was putting vibrato in my voice. I was so scared, right? And so, but I made the choir. And when I was sitting outside that choir room, here's the event. When I was sitting outside that choir room waiting for that audition, there was a young lady there, and I wish I knew who she was because I'd go thank her. And I'd take her and her whole family to dinner. Because 3 times I tried to get up and leave. I said, I can't do this. I'm too scared. And she said, no, you can do this. You can do this. And she convinced me to stay. I went in there, went through that terrifying audition. I made it. I spent my senior year arts magnet, and it changed my life.
The kindness of a stranger.
Right?
It's
My
amazing,
favorite
man.
Radney Foster song.
Yeah.
Have you heard that song?
I haven't. No, I'm not sure I have, but It's funny. That's honestly that's how I live my life. Every day, my family, I try to teach my kids, and now I'm teaching my grandkids. Try to find somebody to be kind to every day. Just
Yeah.
You just never know who might need it, you know. But it's just an incredible story, a random encounter from somebody who
Mm-hmm.
literally shaped your life in the biggest way possible that doesn't even know
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
that's incredible stuff, man.
It
Just
is.
incredible stuff. So you talked about Nashville. 2005 in Nashville
Mm-hmm.
had to be a very, very interesting time because coming from Texas, Texas is very organic. It's very independently fueled in the music business. You go to
Mm-hmm.
Nashville, there's that there too, but it's not really allowed to shine quite the same way it does in Texas. So you
Mm-hmm.
get to Nashville, you're going back there every month, at least one time a month. What is that like? Because I mean, you're coming from Texas, you're in hip hop and rap, and you're doing all of that stuff. Now
Mm-hmm.
you're wanting to be vulnerable as a songwriter, but Nashville itself at that time's going through a lot of evolution, a lot of changes. So
Yeah.
did that kind of shape your direction in a musical sense?
Well, it's funny. What a great question, because it also makes me realize that when I went to Nashville, the organic Texas country, Texas singer songwriter scene, I knew nothing of it. I
Mm-hmm.
was not remotely part of it yet. So it had zero influence on me.
Yeah, and everybody at
Um,
that time is always told you have to go to Nashville, right? Like that's what you have to
yeah,
do in order to make it. You have to go to Nashville. I mean, God, it was so prominent back then. Um,
right.
when a young artist would come up, that's what they would tell you. You know what I mean?
But to me, like I wasn't trying to be an artist. I was 35, 36 when I went to Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was over that part. I just wanted to be my whole goal when I first went to Nashville is to write songs for other people, for famous people,
Mm-hmm.
and get rich. That still hadn't happened. But yeah, I wasn't, uh, the Texas country and songwriter scene hadn't done. I just was unaware of it when I went to Nashville. So my whole thing when I got to Nashville and heard those songs that first trip and every other trip after that was that the songs on the streets of Nashville were incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And they were so much better than anything I had written lyrically until then. That I always tell people, I realized that first trip, I realized that my songs weren't that as good as what I was hearing. And I also realized I just knew right away, I'm not going to learn how to do that in a month or a year or 3 years or even five. Like, it's going to take me a while. That's why I said to my wife on that phone call, I think I need to start coming up here once a month, is because I was aware that, that, and now I look at it and I always tell people that Nashville is like the NFL of songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
there are NFL players in other towns and states,
of course.
but it is the NFL of songwriting. And even if you're really good, even if you're Earl Campbell in high school, you're still not ready for the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Coming out of high school, and so I just went up there and listened. I went to every show I could get to. I started getting writing rooms with other people and learning, and then slowly I got more writing rooms with people that were further down the road than me, which is another way of saying better than me. But further down the road is kind of important,
Yeah.
because if you have the ability, you're just here on the road, and they're here on the road.
Mm-hmm. There's a
They've just been on
process.
it longer,
Mm-hmm.
and so I got in those rooms and learned and learned, and I'm still in those rooms learning and learning and learning. And so that's really, I'm just so glad you brought that up, because I didn't really, I never thought about it till you asked about the Texas music scene and its attitude and its culture, especially pointed towards Nashville. And a lot of the what shall we call it, angst of the Texas scene against Nashville, a lot of it is justified. I'm not saying
absolutely
that stuff isn't real, but I always say to those people that are extra hate Nashville, I always go, well, come to town with me one week. Come hang out with me and go to the shows that I take you to. Go hear my friends who are not famous and who don't have songs on the radio yet. Hear these songs, and then just, there's a disconnect between what's on the streets in Nashville and what makes it to radio. What's on the streets in Nashville? There's some songs, man.
Yeah.
Oh my word. How that, what happens between there and radio? I don't know.
I think the major issue with Nashville, though, is there's not a whole lot of trickle up there, right? So you have all these incredible songs on the street, but they never trickle up into the penthouse offices of the people that need to hear them, right? At least back then, like pre-social media. Like there's a lot more trickle up now with social media, indie labels, and all of that stuff. But listening to your story in your first couple of visits, let's say, to Nashville, seems to me like your fighter mentality really served you well here. Perhaps coming from that broken home and those violent issues. And so, you have a choice now, right? You go there, you realize, hey, you know what? I'm not as good as I thought I was here. So now you have a choice. Right. I can go home with my tail between my legs and just try to make it in wherever I am in Texas, or I can learn to get better. I imagine that fighter
training.
Right, exactly. How much did your fighter mentality help you with that? Like, because it's pretty clear to me already that you have this never give up thing going on, right?
Well, man, you're really good at this because, again, I never thought about it that way, but you're right. I mean, me and my friends talk about all the time how Nashville, if you react to it the right way when you come there and you get your butt kicked by those great songs, you have two reactions, both at the same time. One is, I want to quit, and the other is, I got to get to work.
Mm-hmm.
And they both happen. You get intimidated and inspired at the same time, and that's what happened. I was just like, well, okay, let's get to work. I want to learn how to write songs like that, And then I fell so completely in love with it that I just love the whole process. I love the community, both the community in Nashville, and then it's funny. I'm just so blessed to be a part of both scenes. Now I'm part of the Texas songwriter scene now, which is super. I'm super honored and it's super humbling, and I'm part of the Nashville scene as well. It's just wild and crazy to me that all that is happening.
I find it very inspiring hearing you talk about that, just because you more than a lot of other artists or even songwriters at the time, you had more to fall back on than a lot of them may have. You had other bands that were doing well. You had the hip hop jingles and things like that was doing okay, but that wasn't where your passion was leading you. So, but even though your passion was leading you away from that, you still had that to fall back on if you so chose to do it. And that's a lot more than a lot of people have to fall back on when they're trying to essentially plug songs. And yet you still went through with it. You still fought and still wanted to learn more, still wanted to train, still went back once a month. I find that very inspiring, man. For real.
Well, thank you. That's one of the best compliments I get when people say that I inspire them.
So you have a unique perspective, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, between being a Nashville artist, songwriter, whatever, and a Texas artist, songwriter, whatever. And I want to kind of get your thoughts on one thing, because again, very unique perspective here that you have. So you signed a publishing deal in Nashville at some point, I think 2007. Perhaps?
Yeah, that was my first publishing deal in 2007.
So 2007, just to let people know out there, if you haven't been following the show, a publishing deal is essentially cubicle songwriting. That's what it is. You go to work, you write songs, and then you hope that an artist comes along and picks up your song, cuts it. Hopefully it becomes a single. All of that is part of that process. It's conveyor belt songwriting is what I call it. Maybe that's not an apt description, but that's essentially what it is. That doesn't exist in Texas. That's not here. They don't do that here. But again, fast forward, maybe a few years later down the line, now you're also an independent songwriter here in Texas. You get to make your own decisions. You get to plug the songs to whoever you want. You don't have maybe the monetization backing you quite as much as you did with the publishing deal, but you have that unique perspective on both sides of that. So what do you feel as that guy that's experienced both of those? What are the pros and cons of each? And what I mean is between professional Nashville songwriter and independent Texas songwriter?
Well, I think for me, the independent Texas songwriter from where I'm at can't be separated from my independent Texas songwriter artist career, because that's really what that is.
Right.
That's me putting out my records. I put out 2 so far, 3 if you count the acoustic version of the first record. I'm about to start working on my 3rd. The professional songwriting thing, I'm still in my 2nd publishing deal in Nashville. I signed back in 2018 with a company called Cattle Jam Music, a guy named Steve Block. Been writing for him for 6 years now, or 6.5, I guess, about. And so they're 2 separate things. I will say, as far as all the cuts that I've gotten that have moved the needle at all, the 3 Cody Johnson things so far, 2, there's 3 out in the world Bryan Martin things, and there's some more coming out on his next album whenever that comes out. All those things came from Texas things, came from my relationships, pursuing the Nashville thing, but just I met, it's my favorite story I get to tell. I went down to the way I got these Cody Johnson cuts is I went down to a songwriting contest in Austin called Texas Songwriter U, hosted by Jack Ingram every year, right?
Yep.
And it was 2018. I had just sold the band that I was in for 29 years, Professor D. I had sold the business to focus on songwriting full time, literally weeks before I went to this contest. And so I go down, I spend 3 days at this contest, and I'd entered a bunch of contests before. I'd won a couple, I'd lost the rest, but I was always pretty level-headed about if I won or lost. It was, I didn't get too wound up, excited, and I definitely didn't get mad, But I spent 3 days there, and when I didn't win that contest, I was mad as hell. I was pissed. Which
you just bet on yourself, right? You just bet big on yourself.
I tell the story. It shows. I don't know why I got mad at that one, but I did, and it's just foolishness, it's arrogance and pride and insecurities, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But when I tell the story, I always go, I tell you the ugly part, so that the beautiful part will be as beautiful as it is, and that is there was another contestant there named Jesse Robb Jr., who I'd never met before.
Oh man!
But he had some great songs, and he seemed like a good dude. And after the contest, he didn't win either. He's like, "Hey, we should write." And I was like, "Okay." And so a couple weeks later, we started a song called "Made a Home" over the phone, no less.
Wow!
I was sitting on my porch right here in Poetry, Texas. He was at his house in Magnolia, and it was a pretty day outside. And I just sat out there with my phone, and we started this song called "Made a Home." And keep in mind, I barely knew Jesse. I knew he's a dude that had some great songs and seemed like a good guy. That's about all I knew. A couple weeks later, he calls me out of the blue. "Hey, man, what you doing?" I was like, "I'm at the house working. What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, man, I was over at Cody's house last night having dinner. And I played him that thing we started. Man, he loved it. I mean, loved it. Just flipped out, dude." I was like, "That's cool. Cody who?" And he said, "Cody Johnson." And I said, "Oh, I didn't know you knew Cody." "Oh, yeah, man, we've been friends for years." I find out later they met when they were both auditioning for Nashville Star. You remember that show?
Yep, I sure do.
So they both met there. And so, long story short, Cody finished the song with us over text messages back and forth and voice recordings back and forth. And it was the first song that Cody said, I'm gonna put this on my new album, Human. And he did. And it's the reason he heard God Bless the Boy, which he also put on his Human album.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole situation is the reason he heard a song called Over Missing You, which is about to come out on the deluxe version of the new album in the fall. So, you know, I went down to this song contest. And when I tell the story live, I go, let's go back to that part where I was mad about losing the song contest. And driving 4 hours home from Austin with steam coming out my ears. You know, I think the Lord is looking at me the whole time, just smiling, going, bless your heart. I didn't bring you down here to win some song contest. I brought you down here to get you your first 2 and then 3 and who knows how many Cody Johnson cuts after this and change your life. All from losing a song contest.
It's kind of serendipitous if you think about it, because Cody and Jesse didn't win theirs either, right? When they met in Nashville Star.
And Bryan Martin, I met him at a song contest in Lindale that I lost, but I didn't get mad at that one. But Bryan won that one, but he came up to me the first night we were both playing, and I had played Call It Even, which is the title track to my first record, and a song that's not on anybody's record yet called Piano for Sale. And it's one of the best songs my name's ever been on. And I played those 2 songs, and Bryan comes up to me after the show and he goes, who the boop are you? I just started laughing. I said, I'm Scott Shaw White. Nice to meet you. And we've been friends ever since. And
I love
then he
Bryan,
moved to Nashville.
I love Bryan.
We started. Yeah, he's a good dude. He's a great songwriter.
Absolutely.
He's a great singer.
So just a quick story about Bryan. I used to do a show called Songbirds and Troubadours, which was it was essentially kind of a song swap podcast, right? I love song swaps. I love the story aspect of song swaps when 2 songwriters are just swapping songs and telling stories. So I tried to bring that to a podcast format. And my very last episode of that show was with Billie Joe Jones, who I'm sure you know. She's absolutely exploding right now, which I love that for her. But we had an artist that was supposed to song swap with her that had to cancel the day before the recording of the show. And I said, Billie, do you know anybody that could come in with you? And because, I mean, this is such short notice. This is East Texas. It's not like I can just invent a damn songwriter in East Texas. Like, you know, I mean, she's like, I got somebody. And she brings Bryan Martin with her. I was like, what? What do you mean?
That's amazing.
So at that time, Oilfield Dad was just viral, and he was just really blowing up at the time. And I was like, man, I've got Billie Joe and Bryan Martin in my living room song swapping on a Sunday afternoon. Like, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
So just an unbelievable. You talk about magic. That was a magical day.
Yeah.
Oh man. So let's talk about subject matter in songwriting. I know this is so uber important to you, especially as an indie writer. I don't know that. I'm assuming that just based on what you do write about. Your subject matter is very relevant to many different listeners. I feel you talk about loss and love and heartbreak and pain and God and many other subjects that each of us endure. I mean, we all endure these different emotions that you put into your songs. How important is it to you as a songwriter to focus on these types of things in your songs? You know, the opposite of cookie cutter, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's always been important to me as a writer, just because that's where my heart really is, you know. And one of the things they teach you first in Nashville, and you don't listen to it at first because you're chasing radio, is they go, write what you know, be you. And you're like, well, me's not really radio, and I'm trying to have some hits. Can I get a Blake Shelton cut, please?
Right.
And so when you first go there, you know, you hear that, but you don't hear it. But the longer you're there and the more you learn and the more you dig into your own spirit and your own soul, you know, you start writing who you are and what's important to you, and you start writing what you know.
That's kind of why you went to Nashville to begin with, too, right? In 2005.
It is, and that is kind of funny, isn't it? Because I went there because I had stories to tell. Then when I got there, my whole goal was to write songs for other people, which meant I was chasing radio. try and write hits, which there's nothing wrong with that. But and then I had to make a full circle back to writing songs, that mean something to me. And so I would say that as an artist now, which I never intended to be when I went to Nashville, it just wasn't one of my goals. And now it's like the main thing going on,
And I can't wait to talk about that for sure too. I have some questions about
and so, but the songwriting thing, I walk into rooms in Nashville. I'm up there 2 weeks a month. I was just there last week working, and I think 2 of the days I was in the room with artists that are on record labels, and we're trying to write songs for them, trying to write hits, and also trying to write good songs, at least a good song that could be a hit, and hopefully a great song that could be a hit. But my philosophy in the rooms in Nashville is partly because I believe in the magic of songwriting. I believe in writing whatever is in the room that day. And what I mean by that is whatever idea lights the room up that day and makes us all go, oh yeah, let's do it. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. It makes the hair stand up or just gets your juices flowing, if that idea is a commercial sounding Tim McGraw, Jake Owen kind of thing, great. And if that idea is something that might end up on a Scott Shawn White record that 8 people will listen to, but man, we sure do feel it, that's great too. I believe in trusting the energy in the room and going with that. And so there's a lot of days in Nashville that I'm writing something that could definitely be on your radio, on commercial country radio. And there's a lot of days. If I'm left to my own device, though, I'm writing the kind of stuff that's on my records. So if I'm writing by myself, or if they let me drive the bus that day.
So I love taking a word from an answer and then like you're feeding. I have an outline and sometimes I go by it, sometimes I don't. That's the beauty of getting to talk to folks like you. But man, I've heard the word feel thrown around quite a lot in interviews with artists and songwriters. And you just mentioned the word feel, so I'm going straight to that part of my outline, even though I have other questions in front of that. But I think, unfortunately, as a consumer, somebody who's been a consumer of music for a long time, not just a fan of it, but an actual person that really, researches music, I feel like feel, although it is making a comeback somewhat in mainstream music, especially with the advent or re-advent of roots music that's really becoming more popular now. But I mean, for the most part, it's still really quite lacking in mainstream music. Why do you think feeling, quote unquote, feeling is missing from today's mainstream music?
Man, I wish I had the answer to that. I think a lot of it is, golly, that's a big question with a big answer that I don't completely have. But I think part of it is not to dog this current generation and the generation immediately before it, but they seem to avoid all the deep stuff, and there's so much of a surface level relationship between everybody, and there's also just music has always been about money and profit as far as Nashville and New York and just the business of it, which I get, but it's become even more so to me, and they find little formulas at work and they just stick with that because they know it's going to make money. I don't know. I sure do like real music that makes me feel something.
I feel like things are, man, it's like things are backwards for me now. Like, and I'll tell you what I mean. Like, for me, I've always been such a huge fan of traditional country music, and I've always been real critical of Nashville style country music. And you talked about angst, that Texas angst. I'm not from Texas, but I sure did inherit that angst big time for Nashville country music. Nowadays, though, I feel like almost like there's more feeling from pop music than there is from country music.
Mm.
And that's just weird, man. That's so weird to me. Like, I feel more from a Taylor Swift song than I do from a mainstream country song nowadays. And that shouldn't be the way it is at all, right?
I'll tell you, though, I mean, you bring up a great example. And, you know, there'll be some people out there that want to shoot me for this. But Taylor Swift is one of the greatest songwriters of the last 20 years.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I work in the factory where songs are made. I mean, I know.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a beast, man. And she writes what she knows. She writes real life. She always has. That's why she blew up when she was a teenager.
She makes you feel. She makes you
she
feel.
Wasn't, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't trying to write something for a 20-year-old girl to sing.
Right.
Or a 30-year-old woman that would sing. She was writing what she was living and experiencing. She was writing what she knew, and she was writing the crap out of it.
Right.
And I said back then, if she continues to, as she matures and grows in age, to write what she knows at 25 and at 30 and at 35 and at 40, there's never been an artist like her.
There hasn't been.
Because
look,
that's why you feel her, though,
mm-hmm.
is because she's writing her life.
Right. And you know you've made it, in my opinion, you know you've made it when Paul McCartney goes to your show, right? Like,
yeah.
That's
right.
Look, McCartney is in the front row, like, dancing to my music. Like, how do you even perform at that, dude? Like, I would have lost my mind if I saw that. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely correct. And I feel like Taylor gets a lot of hate. And I think a lot of it is jealousy fueled, perhaps. I don't know. But you're right. She writes what she knows. It resonates with millions and millions and millions of people of all ages, which is crazy. I'm a 47-year-old straight male, and her music resonates with me. And I know it resonates with my 7-year-old grandson the same way. And, you know, and that's really hard to do.
And it resonates because it's real. Like, even, like, you know, I have people come up to me at my shows, and I'll just call it even out of the air because it's one of the main ones. It's very specific to my life. It's very heavy. There are a lot of people that have been through what I've been through, and they hear that song and they've been through that. But I also have a ton of people come up to me and go, that song was not my childhood, but it totally resonated with me. I totally related to it, even though those weren't my parents and that wasn't my life. And the reason it resonated is because it's real.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Period. You know? And so I think all the bonfire and tailgate stuff, you know, so much of it is made up. That's the part that got everybody, you know, like, oh man, this is obviously fake. Like, why are we singing about this? And why are we still singing about it? Mm-hmm. You know? So yeah, I think the real thing is the important part, you know?
So you talked about you never had the plan to be an artist in your own right. And a lot of songwriters feel that way at first, right? And I know a lot of songwriters that aren't even performance artists at all. I mean, that's what they do. They write songs, and they're fabulous at it. Like I said, many songwriters in the world, they never have plans to ever become a performance artist themselves. And of course, if people know your story, that was absolutely the case for you as well. You talked about Call It Even, which was your first release in 2021 as an artist in your own right. And that made some pretty big waves out there. It got a lot of critical success, and a lot of people were talking about it in a positive way. So now that you've seen success, quote-unquote success, whatever that means, as a writer and now as an artist as well, what's been more fulfilling to you?
You mean the artist of the songwriter thing?
Yeah, from a passion standpoint, what's been more fulfilling for you?
I would have to say the artist-songwriter side.
He just picked both.
Well, no, I was creating its own category, the artist-songwriter and then the songwriter. Because the songwriter thing, I'm still doing, trying to write songs for famous people. I'm still doing that 2 weeks a month. But I can't separate the songwriter from the artist part on as far as my records, because it's the whole point, right? And that side has been, I've never felt more at home and more sure about my place in this world, this music business, than I am now as a touring singer-songwriter. Because I go out and I play these shows, and half my show is telling the stories behind the songs. I mean, literally half of my show is that. And the reactions and the text messages and the social media messages I get from people and the conversations I have with people before and after the shows, sometimes months later at the next show that I'm at that particular venue, are just stunning. And these songs that I thought I was just writing for me turned out to be for a whole bunch of other people.
Yep.
And that's just amazing. I told a few people lately, like, this touring singer-songwriter thing turned into a ministry of sorts, which was the last thing. I mean, it wasn't even the last thing. It wasn't on the list. You know,
Yeah.
when I came to Nashville, it's just want to write songs for other people. Then years later, I was like, I probably need to put out a record with my own name on it if I'm going to start playing shows. But I didn't have time. Then COVID happened, shut the world down. I had time. I made a record. I put it out. Once I put that record out, I was like, I got to start putting out records, you know? And, but for it to turn into something God is using in people's lives, that's way above my pay grade and way beyond my understanding. And I'm super grateful for it, you know? And like I said, therefore I feel more at home and right where I'm supposed to be in this whole ecosystem of the music world than I've ever felt. So I'm
Yeah.
grateful.
That's a great answer. Let's talk about perspective. You did bring up perspective a little bit. Perspective in songwriting is everything. And you can't always,
Everything.
yes, you can't always write about your own perspective because you only have so much in your cup that you've lived. So
Yeah.
you do have to find inspiration outside of yourself and tell other people's stories with the same passion. And that is so difficult to do. Just in any form of writing, whether it's songs, whether it's novels, whatever it is. But obviously, you do have an overly emotional connection to a lot of your songs that have been written from your own perspective, and that shines through on your records big time. I might add, just so you know, as a listener, that's something I'm a big fan of yours for. The question really is about writing perspective, though. Do you find yourself writing songs from your own perspective more often than someone else's? And again, like I said, you only have so much in your cup. So when you do reach outside of your own perspective, is there a difference in the process for creating the song?
You know, being as I'm in Nashville 2 weeks a month writing songs, I definitely write from and in and out of other people's perspectives freaking all the time, because you don't walk into the room and write an idea that's on your list that's from your life every day. Matter of fact, it doesn't really happen very often. We're usually in there with three of us, sometimes four of us, throwing ideas around, and you just kind of draw from everybody's experiences. And if you're in the room with an artist, you definitely lean towards the artist. You're asking the artist, well, tell me, you know, if it's the artist's idea, okay, tell me more about that situation. Tell me more about your life. Trying to get details from the artist's life into the song. So that writing from other people's perspectives is built into my workflow because I am a different animal than most of the touring singer-songwriters out there because I'm in Nashville 2 weeks a month. You know, and my job there is to write songs for commercial country radio.
Right.
Um,
Well, like
and
one of the songs that I love from you is "Just Not Today," and this is a song that was written from a place of vulnerability and loss in your own life, and so you're going to
yeah,
have a certain passion level for that song that may not
hmm
exist if you're writing somebody else's perspective in a story that they are more passionate about. So, for that song that you're writing from the perspective of somebody else, how do you find the passion to make sure that that song is as good as the one that you wrote from your own perspective?
well, I would say there's two things. There's two ways to look at that. First of all, like my song "Dad's Garage and Mama's Kitchen"
Mm-hmm.
would be one perspective. That's really my co-writer Helene's childhood,
Oh man, she's
right?
fabulous, by the way.
Yeah,
Oh,
she's a
yeah.
beast, right?
Yes, I
And
agree.
so she and I wrote that song. It took us 4 or 5 different days to write it over several months. But that's her story. But it was real, and um, so that's kind of easy for me on one hand. The craft of it, there's a reason it took us 4 or 5 different days. The craft of it is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but and so there's that, and then on the side of writing something like we wrote this last week a song that I love, that I hope you hear on your radio. I won't say the title because somebody might be able to take it and try to steal it and write it a different way.
Of
But
course, yeah.
it's a very beachy, commercial, fun song, right? And it was the artist's idea, and we got it wrapped up. I love that song. I love all the processes because I love the craft. I Songwriting is a puzzle, and I love the puzzle. Even if the puzzle isn't something personal to me, even if the puzzle isn't something that makes me feel something deep, even if the puzzle is just meant to make me not think about anything for a while and turn my brain off and just have fun and enjoy 3 minutes. Um, I love the puzzle of it so much that I just enjoy all of it. That doesn't mean I enjoy every day. I mean, writing. I mean, you know, we have some days that the song just sucks.
Mm-hmm. Hey, look,
the ideas the
some
idea sucked. We shouldn't even try to write the idea because the idea was lame. And but most days you have something at least to work with, and I just love the puzzle so much that
Mhm.
you know
Well,
that's how I do it.
sometimes putting a puzzle together is really difficult, and you just need a break from that, right? Like you just look. You
Yeah,
know what? I need to watch a movie today. We'll work on the puzzle tomorrow.
yeah, but I mean, it's the part of me that loves the puzzle that enables me to write from other people's perspectives in those situations where we're not writing something that would be on a Scott Shawn White record, where we're
Yeah.
writing something that would be on a Blake Shelton record or something. And it's the craft part that I've learned over all these years in Nashville and from some of my heroes in Texas. So
Well, that's a great way of looking at it. And just along the same line, you're talking about, cutting songs of your own that are from your perspective. Is there a difference in your writing process? Let me think of the best way to put this. If you're writing a song for yourself, first of all, do you know beforehand that you're writing a song for yourself? And if so, is there a difference in the process for you when, I know I'm writing a song for myself versus I'm trying to write something for Blake Shelton or whoever might be in mind?
hmm um, the first answer to that is I hardly ever know that I'm writing something for me when I'm writing it. Um, I say hardly ever. There are times, like when I wrote "God Is Good," I definitely knew I was writing that for me. Call It Even, I definitely. I mean, it was those are my story. Um, but um, yeah, most of these songs on my 2 records so far, and the songs that I've chosen so far for my 3rd record, are songs that I've just collected over the years. That when we wrote them, we were writing something trying to aim at Tim McGraw or somebody, just something with some real meat on the bone and some real life in it. And then I was like, oh, well, I could record that because I feel that. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can, I believe that coming out of my mouth, you know, kind of thing. And then there are, though, like I have a couple of songs that are cooking at the moment that are, I'm definitely writing them, working on them with me in mind and my third record in mind. We'll see if I finish them in time for the record. We'll see if when I finish them, I think they're good enough for the record,
I was going
all
to
that.
ask you that. I was going to ask you that. How much does this is not on the outline as well? How much does selflessness kind of play a role in your selection of songs for yourself versus somebody else? And we all deal with imposter syndrome, right? Where we're telling ourselves that we're not good enough. This song's not good enough for you, right? I mean, there's that selflessness versus selfishness, and how often do you deal with that?
When you bring up selflessness, the first thing that pops in my head really is co-writing.
Yeah.
I always tell younger writers, and particularly when am on the road and, I speak at some songwriting camps and universities from time to time and stuff about it. And when subject co-writing comes up, I always stress that I think the most important thing about co-writing, the two most important things, is one is you got to leave your ego at the door, and serve the song first. Don't worry about how many lines you got in the song or if that's your melody. Don't worry about making the song as good as it can be. Serve the song first, because there are songs in Nashville that I'm part of that I had 5% of. I'm responsible for 5%. There are other songs in Nashville that I've been a part of that I've been responsible for 95%.
Mm-hmm.
But it gets split equal. If there's two writers, it's 50-50. If it's three, it's 33-33-33. And I think that's the way it should be, because my 5% that day may have changed the entire direction of that song.
Absolutely.
Or their 5% on the song that I, drove that day. But it's just about the song, and then also the selflessness in co-writing is you got to leave your ego at the door, because you got to just throw, in my opinion, you got to throw out everything that pops in your head, even the stuff that absolutely sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And you can preface it with, this is terrible, but maybe it'll make you think of something. You'll hear me say that. If you were in a writing room with me, you'll hear me say that 50 times a day. This is not it. This is terrible for a million different reasons, but da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I do that because countless times over 20 years, I've heard somebody take one word of what I just said and come up with the line that goes there.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, oh, yeah, that's it. And vice versa. Somebody said something, and I'm like, well, not that, but what if we did this? And we all go, oh, yeah, that's it, And it's all in serving the song, On the selfless or selfish side of making your own record, though, there is a point making your own record that you do need to be selfish. And I didn't know that till I made my first record. But when I was making that first record, I had this realization that really helped me understand writing with artists. I realized that the only person that had to be happy with this album I was making for the rest of their life
is you.
For the rest of time was me.
Yep, absolutely.
The only person that had to listen to it for the rest of their life and needing to make sure you don't have a moment that you go, man, I was going to do this there. I wish I had done that,
Mm-hmm.
And I was and am and will always be determined on my records to make sure I'm happy with it. Like my publisher asked me about a song on this last record. And I had said that I didn't, I didn't think one of my co-writers probably liked the way I particularly approached the production and the feel on one song. And he said, well, did you ask them? And I said, did you ask their opinion before you did it? I said, no. I said, I love them and they're awesome. And I have all the respect in the world for them, but their name's not on this record.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to be happy with it for the rest of their life. I do.
Yep.
And
you're the one performing the songs all over the place too.
Right.
So,
and if they make their own record, they need to do it the way they want to do it.
Right.
They don't need to be asking me, And so, I think that's the one time you do have to be a little bit selfish, because, like I said, you're the only person that has to be happy with it for the rest of eternity.
Yep. So I got a couple more questions for you, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
As is the case with many songwriters, I feel like loss always plays a role in your craft, whether it's tragic loss or natural loss, whatever it may be. I feel like it's played a role in your creative process as well over the years. I would love to hear you tell the audience how loss has affected you, not just creatively, but just from a life standpoint.
Yeah. I think you hear about loss on my records, because it's real to me. I've lost all three of my brothers. Joey, I'm the youngest in the family. I still have a sister. But Joey had Down syndrome. He was the next oldest. And he lived with me and my family most of my adult life. I was his primary caregiver from the time I was 18, except for about an 8 or 9 year stretch there. And then he finished out the last, I don't know, 15 years of his life with us. And he passed away in 2016. And so he was also kind of like a son,
Mm-hmm.
because, I take care of him his whole life. And so I'd never been through anything like that. And then my oldest two siblings, my two remaining brothers, Daniel and Kirk, they passed away exactly 2 weeks apart in 2021, on March 21st and April 4th. And my mom passed away in 2003, and for the most part, she pretty much drank herself to death. So I just had a lot of it, and so I think that if you do this songwriting thing right and do it from the place it's meant to be done from, you have to write about those things. You know, so many of those songs too have been so much therapy for me and help. Like the broken part on my first record. I mean, I was sitting out on this porch. Joey had passed away. We moved here just months after Joey passed, here to this house in Poetry, and I'm sitting on that porch, and like I said, I'd never been through anything like that, and I was just sitting there going, "Well, this is a broken heart." And then I thought, "Well, what? Hold on, what exactly is broken?" Because I mean, it's still pumping blood,
Mm-hmm.
and it still writes songs, and it still knows that Jesus loves me. So what's broken? And that's, literally what started that song. The first verse says, the part that pumps the blood through my veins, the part that makes my voice crack when I sing, the part that takes my hat off, thankful that I'm free, and the part that knows that Jesus died for me. That was just sitting there on that porch.
Mm-hmm.
Is all that was. And then we wrote the song to make it sound like it was a romantic relationship or something that, you know, ended or she passed or whatever. But um, the first verse is just completely about me sitting on that porch going, this is a broken heart.
You talk about the
Um,
therapeutic nature of music, and man, it's so true. Not just from a consumer perspective, but from the creator side as well. And I also know from talking to hundreds of songwriters that I've been so blessed to be able to pick people's brains. But I know a lot of those songs that are most vulnerable to a songwriter never see the light of day. I'm sure you have those songs as well, but for you, the songs have seen the light of day, right? The
it's
songs,
one benefit to making your own records.
right? But that's my point. Like, you've decided to put these vulnerable songs out to the world, which
Yeah.
means people are listening to them, which means they're going to ask for them, which means you're going to have to perform them, which means you're going to have to be vulnerable in public all the time. So, are you deciding that with all of that knowledge ahead of time, or is it more of like just a spontaneous, you know what, I love this song, I'm going to put it out, and whatever happens, happens?
It's kind of all of that. I I'm just, people, it shows all the time because when I tell the stories, behind these songs, some of the stories are pretty heavy, and but I kind of lay it all out there. I do it for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, I want people to know that they're not alone. And if I don't tell you my story completely transparently and honestly with all the ugly details, if I left all that out, you might leave that show and think you're still the only person that's been through whatever that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, so I don't want anybody to feel that way. I want everybody to go, oh, he's been through what I've been through, and he survived, because I'm sitting there in front of him telling him the story, and also just believe in being real. Like I had a guy come up to me, another artist, a couple of years ago at a little show in Baton Rouge, and he came up to me afterwards. He goes, "Man, you're just so raw and so just open. Like,
Yep.
is that something you had to work on?" And I'd never had anybody ask me that question, so I'd never thought about it. And I just kind of giggled and I went, "No, it's not something I had to work on." And he said, "Is this something you have to like consciously make a decision?" I was like, "No, it's just who I am. It's just what I do when I play these songs. I'm going to tell you the life behind it, and I think it's the only authentic way to do it. It's the only authentic way to present it. So
I love this show for so many reasons. And I think the biggest reason is because everybody's story is a circle, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And we just proved that with you. The beginning of your story was the beginning of your fighter mentality. And your fighter mentality, the answer to that man's question, is that just something you do? And the answer is no, it's just your fighter mentality, right? It's just that's who you became because of life experience, and that fighter mentality has allowed you to share your soul with other people, and pain be damned, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing stuff, man. So the second song you're going to do on the show today, man, again, I appreciate your time so much, Scott. You're going to do
appreciate you.
God Bless the Boy. This is the one that you were talking about earlier, where Cody Johnson cut this song. Made a really, a lot of people have listened to it for that reason. Tell us the story behind the song, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I wrote that song with my friends Terry Joe Box and Barrett Baber in Franklin, Tennessee, probably about 9 years ago now. And I tell this story at shows all the time. Terry Joe and I drove down to Barrett's house that day to write, and we were waiting in his basement studio for him because he was upstairs getting his then 2 or 3 year old daughter ready for daycare. I think she was 3 maybe. And he was trying to explain to her why she couldn't wear high heels to daycare. And those little pink Barbie doll high heels. And he said at some point, she's pretty feisty and she's just giving him hell. And he said at some point, I just looked up to the heavens and went, "God bless the boy you decide to love." And he's like, "Ooh, I'm about to write a country song." Got her off the daycare and came downstairs and said, "Hey, why don't we write a song called God Bless the Boy about my daughter?" And I have 2 daughters. Mine are older. Mine are 34 and 31. His is about 9 or 10 now. But and so we wrote the song that day, and we liked it that day. Maybe we liked it a lot. We didn't fully know. And then we came back to it. I think Terry Joe texted us and go, "Hey, did we finish that thing?" And I was like, "Yeah." I said, "But we need to get a work tape on it." And when we laid down the work tape, we got back together. It was a couple months later probably, and laid down the work tape. We were all like, "Oh, that's pretty good." And then Jesse Robb Jr. played it for Cody on his bus in 2020, and he said, Jesse said, "Man, I've known Cody a long time. I've never seen him cry about a song," because Cody has 2 daughters. Mm-hmm. And he said Cody was crying before he got to the chorus, and it was right before Cody was about to go on stage in Nacogdoches at his show. This is on the bus.
Bonita Creek, right?
Yeah. Well, it was actually at the rodeo.
Okay.
But Bonita Creek was running it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it was at the rodeo arena, and it was backstage on the bus. And yeah, he said, "Man, I can't listen to that right before I go on stage." So he cut it off for the chorus. So I'll listen to the rest of it after the show, and he did. And he put it on his Human album, and put it out in the world. So,
well, real quick before we play the song, I forgot to mention earlier, just Jesse Robb coming into this conversation a couple of times today. We talked about kindness earlier. I don't know too many people more kind than Jesse Robb Jr.
Right.
Just wanted to throw that out there. I'd love to interview him someday. I haven't had the pleasure yet, but
he's one of my favorite humans on the planet.
Yeah, mine too, and I've never met him, so I'm right there with you. But yeah, this is "God Bless the Boy" by the Songwriter, one of the 3 songwriters. If you guys haven't heard a popular song that you know from somebody who's uber famous, like Cody Johnson, and then you get to listen to the song in its rawest form from the Songwriter, here's your chance, guys. This is "God Bless the Boy." Y'all check it out.
Here's a little song that I wrote with a couple of friends of mine 8-9 years ago, and about 3 years ago, Mr. Cody Johnson recorded it and put it on his Human album. It's for all the daddies and daughters out there. It's called "God Bless the Boy." She won't let me help her tie her shoes. No, daddy, I can do it myself. When she don't get her way, she'll cross her arms and hold her breath. She's a handful, she's a mess, digging in the dirt in her princess dress. Goes from tiny tornado to sleeping on my chest. God bless the boy that melts the way I do. When she smiles at him the first time, he'll be done, yeah, he'll be through. Giving patience and kindness and a heart that's full of her, and the sense to know what she's worth. 'Cause ain't nobody ever gonna be good enough. So God bless the boy she decides to love. Hope his daddy's teaching him how to shake my hand and look me in the eye. Taking him fishing and busting his butt when he ain't acting right. Hope he's in every prayer his mama says. Learns to work for every dollar he gets, and has a sense of humor, gonna need it for a girl like this. God bless the boy that melts the way I do. When she smiles at him the first time, he'll be done, yeah, he'll be through. Giving patience and kindness and a heart that's full of her, and the sense to know what she's worth. 'Cause ain't nobody ever gonna be good enough. So God bless the boy she decides to love. God bless the boy that melts the way I do. When she smiles at him the first time, he'll be done, yeah, he'll be through. There ain't nobody ever gonna be good enough. So God bless the boy she decides to love. God bless the boy she decides to love. Thank you, Cody Johnson.
All right, so we are back once again with Scott Sean White. We're going to wrap this up. I know Scott has to get out of here in a few minutes. He's going on vacation. That's going to be fun, right?
Going on vacation with my bride.
Yep.
Yes.
Fun times, man. He's like, man, you know what? We scheduled this for 4, but I think my wife will kill me if we continue going down that road. You didn't say that, but I have a wife, so I understand how that works. Believe that.
I
But
appreciate you.
a couple of just cookie cutter puff questions.
Yeah.
We've done the deep thing already. What projects do you have coming up? I know you're talking about possibly doing another acoustic record, maybe.
Well, I'm gonna put out acoustic versions of stuff that's on this current album.
Okay.
Even better on the bad days, just for content for Spotify and streaming. But I'm looking to start working on my third album, studio album, here in the fall. I think. I'm going through the process of picking out the songs officially and starting to play them a lot to get used to them and figure out how we want to approach them and all that stuff. So hopefully get that started in the fall and hopefully have brand new music out maybe summertime next year.
Nice. So we didn't get to talk about the second record, which I would have liked to. But so maybe when the new record comes out, you can come back on the show and we can talk about both of them.
That sounds great.
That would be really cool. Here's a question that'll make you think a little bit. We talked about having a famous artist choose a song and blow up, and then you become uber famous. One of the popular things in podcasting nowadays is the Mt Rushmores, right? So who is your Mt Rushmore of artists that you would want to cut a Scott Shaun White song? You have to choose 4 and only 4 for your Mt Rushmore. These are people that you would want a Scott Shaun White song to be one of their cuts.
Okay, is it okay with you if I change it to the Mt Rushmore of songwriters that I love?
Absolutely.
Because I don't really care about the artist.
Boom! Let's go.
I don't mean that in a mean way, but like my goals and aspirations, like if they'll make me money, cool. Like
usually,
if you ask my wife, the Mt Rushmore of artists, she's gonna list the ones that would make us the most money: Morgan Wallen, Luke Combs, Lainey Wilson. And I ain't mad at her. I totally get it.
Yep.
But if
I would have said, in my defense, I would have said songwriters, but I thought that might have been a little bit too much asking you to just narrow it down to 4 songwriters.
No, because I know that answer a lot quicker.
Okay, so Mt Rushmore of songwriters, your favorite 4 songwriters.
My Mt Rushmore of songwriters starts with a guy named Tony Lane. Do you know who that is?
I don't. And educate me.
I just played the Bluebird with him last week, the Bluebird Cafe in Nashville. He wrote "Run" for George Strait. He wrote "I Need You" to McGraw and Faith Hill. He wrote "Letters from Home," John Michael Montgomery. "Little Past Little Rock," Leanne Womack. "Hello World," Lady Antebellum. I mean, I could just go on and on. But he has a self-titled album called Tony Lane. It's on Spotify and all that literally changed the way I write. I heard that record. I bought the CD in 2008. I listened to it all 10 hours on the way home, literally the whole 10-hour drive home to Texas, and it changed the way I write. So he's the first on that mountain. A guy named Bobby Pinson is second on that mountain.
Wow, there's a name I have not heard Bobby Pinson's name in a long time.
He is just a beast. He has a record called "Man Like Me."
I agree. Yes.
That also deeply affected the way I write songs. It's got one hit on it. He had one hit as an artist. It's called "Don't Ask Me How I Know."
Don't Ask Me How I Know. Yep.
But that song is brilliant. It's freaking great. It's not even close to the best song on the record. Mm-hmm. The record is so good.
That's always how it is, isn't it?
Yeah, and but so Bobby Pinson, and then Tom Douglas has got to be on that mountain. He wrote "House That Built Me," and he wrote "Grown Men Don't Cry," and Southern Voice. That's kind of one of his more poppy up tempo. "Raise 'Em Up." I mean, he has so many hits he couldn't play them all at the Bluebird Cafe in one night. He'd have to do a medley. Right, and he's in the Songwriter Hall of Fame. So there's 3, and then my fourth would have to be Walt Wilkins or Radney Foster. If I could combine the two.
Oh my gosh, man!
So
you're talking my language right now.
Yeah.
Wow.
And of course, I mean, there's all sorts of people I'm leaving off. Obviously, Guy Clark. I need a Mount Rushmore with like 20.
We just need a really big mountain, right?
I need a big mountain. But the four and plus 4A. Yes, that's where the people that have been the most influential in how I write and how I learned to write.
Well,
Those
God
would be
bless
it.
you. I could not narrow it down to 20. I just, man.
Yeah.
And I'm so
There's
blessed.
bunch.
I've got just this year. I decided to start podcasting again in May. I
Mhm.
did almost 400 episodes between like 2015 and 2018, and then
Mhm.
I just got burnt out, and I was like, you know what, I need a break. And
Yeah.
but in the meantime, from 2018 to 2024, my hiatus, I was keeping a mental note of who, if
Mhm.
I did ever come back to here, and I decided to do this again, who I would want to talk to. And man, I had such a long list of songwriters, yourself included, that I really wanted to
Mhm.
talk to. And now I'm getting the bucket list crossed off, man. I get to talk to
That's
Mark
awesome.
Narmore, who wrote That's What I Love About Sundays.
Uh,
I got to talk to Marty Dodson, who wrote Must Be Doing Something Right. I got to talk to, gosh, you talked about 80s rock. I just got to talk to Mike Tramp from White Lion, who wrote When the
Come
Children
on.
Cry. Yeah, I mean,
Come
just
on.
just unbelievable stuff that's happening for me, right? Joe
Yeah.
Doyle, who wrote In Pictures for Alabama.
Yeah.
Like, just so many cool
Awesome.
things that are happening, and just so blessed to get to talk to folks like you. Where can people follow along with Scott Sean White on
Well,
social media and stuff?
there's ScottSeanWhite.com, and Sean is SEAN because I think my mama had a crush on Sean Connery. So SCOTTSEAN White, and then I'm on all those things at Facebook and Instagram. I don't do much on TikTok because there's not enough hours in the day. But Instagram and Facebook, if anybody wants to follow along the journey of a touring uh, singer songwriter all over God's creation, it's the place to do it.
And
So I will
go
keep you up to
watch a
date.
show. By God, that's the best way to support an artist. I feel just go to a
Yeah, it
show,
is.
and while you're there, buy some merch, buy the record, say
Mm-hmm.
hello, say a kind word. You've already explained how much fuel that gives you as a
Boy,
human and a writer. Um,
yeah.
Man, Scott Sean White on the Boston Chris podcast. I mean, what's better than this, y'all? Thank y'all for watching. Make sure you're following Scott everywhere. Again, Scott, thank you so much for your time.
And thank you, sir. I appreciate you so much.
Nope.
Hey, this is Ross Gibson. Thank you for tuning in to the Boston Chris podcast.